and I get a little bit terrified, and then I see the look in your eyes.
Turn around, bite eyes. Every now and then I fall apart.
And I need you now tonight, and I need you more than ever. And if you only hold me tight, we'll be holding on forever. And we'll
I get up.
Boy, I hungry.
Wait, come see that.
Take advantage of Perky's Pizza's college student discount. Spend $10 to $50 and get 10% off, or spend $51 and up for a 15% discount. Flash your ID and save big today.
What's up, guys? What's up? What's up? Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Come on down, everyone. The bell has rung. It's time for another exclusive interviews. I'm so happy to be here with you. Yo, it's hot. It's hot, so the fan is blowing and everything is blowing, and because I refuse to put on AC. Okay, I am refusing. We are still in May. Right? We are still in May. We can probably afford AC in August, but not May, June, July, and August. Okay. So welcome, guys. Welcome to the show. Come on down. Come on down. So good to have you guys joining me wherever you're locked in. Make sure you share the live. Once you get on, share the live. Let me know that you're on. Let me know that you're ready for us to have a good time. You ready to have a good time? Ready for us to have a good time? We're gonna be talking with Yuri. Yuri's in the house. Yuri is in the house. I feel I almost want to say like we have Yuri in the hot, but you know my seat is never hot. My seat is quite comfortable, and we're gonna have a nice chat here this evening. We're gonna get to know a little bit about Yuri, someone I've admired for years, and I'm so excited to have him on my show this evening. So I wanna say thank you to all those of you who are tuning in wherever you're listening to the sound of my voice. It's so good to have you on. Thank you for choosing this show. You could be anywhere else in the world, but you choose to be right here. And I truly appreciate you. And the love is definitely mutual. All right. I am excited to bring you another show here this evening. Those of you who are locked in on YouTube, you know, I like to call out the YouTubers first and foremost. The YouTubers, I like to call y'all out because or I say shout y'all out, because call you out means I telling you of something bad. I telling you a few, but shout you out. I just really want to shout you guys out because the YouTubers is where it's at. If you're on YouTube, I truly appreciate that you're viewing from YouTube. It is super important to view the show from YouTube because, like I've been saying for the last month and a half, Facebook just take down my life after 1 month. So, all of this hard work on Facebook is kind of useless, right? So I really want you guys to subscribe to the YouTube page. Make sure you follow on the YouTube. Turn on the notifications. You see you messaging me and asking me to share the live for you or share the link for you. That makes no sense. All you have to do is subscribe. If you subscribe and you turn on your notifications, when I go live, you get notified, right? That I just went live. And if, for example, you're on your way to work, or you're probably at home doing laundry, or you're probably looking for something good to look at, you can view it in the comfort of your own home at your own leisure. All right. And if you can't look at it, then you can save it for later. It's always available. You can search the shows very easily on YouTube. You can get access to there's no need to go and look like on Facebook. Okay. Sorry, I'm throwing shit for Facebook, but it is what it is. All right. It is what it is, and we keep it 100. I want to say thank you very much, guys, for to especially my sponsors. I want to say thank you very much to Lindomart for sponsoring the show. I want to say thank you very much to the National Cooperative Credit Union, our community financial partner, sponsoring, as well as Turkey's Pizza. So those of you know, Lindomart is where freshness and quality with unbeatable service, it comes together in an ultimate shopping experience. So Lindomat, they're more than just a supermarket. They're a community that values great prices, premium products, top tier customer service, and of course, whether you're looking for fresh produce or if you're looking for everyday essentials or that special ingredient to maybe elevate your meal, Lindomat has got you covered. All right. They always have new arrivals in stock, so check them out. They're located on Federation Drive, right next to Lindo Park. It's Lindo Mart for a reason, right? So check them out. Visit Lindo Mart today. Your trusted grocery partner, always delivering quality and convenience. And the National Cooperative Credit Union, our community financial partner. There's always exciting news from NCCU, right? You need a boost this summer, and it's not the kind of boost that you just drink. It's the kind of boost that goes right in your pocket. The promotion to access $10,000 larger shares with no security, no hassle, and low interest rate is going on through till September 15th. So if you're looking about probably taking a little summer trip, you probably want to go on a little lime, a little duvet, that's an opportunity. You're probably thinking about, you probably want to be like Jael, get all your school supplies at the end of June. That's what I do. I mean, you can be like Jael, right? You probably want to get something new in your house or probably paint your house. I don't know. You want to spruce something up. You probably want to get a new wardrobe. You have access to up to $10,000. So don't wait. It's called the Get It Now at NCCU, and you can make your summer goals happen. Don't forget that you can bank anytime with the NCCU at CU Online. That's CU Online, and you can swipe freely worldwide with your NCCU International debit card. Perky's Pizza. Y'all know what tomorrow is? It's Friday. And Friday, what happens in my house? Every Friday is Perky's Pizza Friday in my house. We sometimes skip the line and order, and it gets delivered to you if you want to do that. If you want to be like me sometimes and go in the line, it's up to you. But you can get your fresh, the best pizza on island. No ifs, ands, or buts. Or maybe you can ask my children. They will tell you. You can order. You call in to order, or you can visit perkyspizza.online, and you can skip the lines. No hassle. Just hot, delicious food delivered to your door. And while you're at it, check them out because they also have wings and everything in between, like their little roti. Okay, their roti doesn't be scrumptious. So don't forget to take advantage of that. And also the good news for students, the student discount, it continues throughout May. Well, May is almost done. So it goes till the end of the semester. So make sure you check them out. When you check them out, you let them know that you're a student. You flash your student. All right, guys, y'all ready? Ready for Yuri? Are we ready for Yuri? Let me know where you guys locked in from. Drop me a note. Let me know. I feel like I'm talking to myself, or it's just quiet. Like, am I talking to myself? Like, send me a message, send me a DM, tell me I dare Jael, I pull up, I pose, I waiting for you to start this show. Say something so we know you're ready, you on it. Like my father used to say, you're really able and you're ready, right? Drop me a note and let me know that you're locked in. Let me know where you're locked in from. I'd really love to shout you out. I got some top fans this week, so I want to shout out all my top fans, my top of tops. Big up to you all, my top fans. And thank you very much for following me. We almost at 85K, yo. We almost at, we're like just a few hundred shy of 85K. So big up to all those of you top fans who've been sharing the content, top fans who've been loving the content, who've been engaging underneath the content. Because the engagement, I always get notifications on Facebook. Jael, your engagement is fire. All right, my engagement is fire. I absolutely love the fact that you guys enjoy the content, and I'm here for it. I'm just here for it. Tara, we see you. Tara say, I hear. I hear. Present. Present, miss. Tara is here. We're ready to get the show on the road. Oops, what's going on here? Let's, okay. All right. The audio went on by accident. Sorry, my bad. All right, we just had to do that. Okay, so let's get this Monstrat. Big up yourself, Monstrat in the house. You touching everywhere, you know. Monstrat in the house. Big up. Let me know where you guys are logged in from. I truly appreciate you guys coming on. And don't forget, you can always subscribe. That's the best place to view the show. All right. So just click on the subscribe on the link that's pinned to my page on Facebook, or you can follow me at youtube.com/JL Joseph. All right. That's my name, JL Joseph. That's it. You can't miss it. All right. Let's get this show on the road. Let's get this crack-a-lacking. I don't want to waste no more time. And let's bring on Mr. Jones. I almost feel like I should play Amy Winehouse, Mr. Jones. You know that song? Huh? You know that song, Yuri, Mr. Jones? We're getting ready for Yuri Jones, who's in the house, who's gonna be talking to us for a little bit. We're gonna be chatting for a little bit. I like I said before, you know, I've admired Yuri. Yuri has gone from being corporate to being a creative, and that's so. And then corporate again in a kind of a way, in an entrepreneur way, right? Let's welcome to the show for the very first time, Mr. Yuri Jones.
Hi, Jael. Hi, thanks for having me on.
Welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. I'm looking forward to the show for the last couple of weeks.
Have you?
Of course, of course.
Why are you looking forward to the show?
Well, it's a big platform, so I was looking forward to having a discussion with you, getting my name out there. Hoping that your audience can interact with my audience. So I'm hoping it can be a mutually beneficial interaction with us.
Wonderful, and we're happy to have you on. I'm excited to have you on. As a matter of fact, I asked for you to be on. I was like, I'd like to have Yuri on the show, because sometimes people don't know that they can actually reach out to be guests on the show. They think that Jael nitpicks everybody that she wants on a show. That's not the case. People do reach out and say, "Hey, Jael, I would like to be on your show. I do have the X, Y, and Z. Can I come on?" And more than likely, I say yes. Right? More often than none, I say yes, no problem. Let's do this. But there are also people that I specifically select. I'm like, I want Yuri. I said, I want Brenton Hill here.
Yeah.
I want Yuri. There are certain people, because I follow certain people online. I follow their work, and I admire their work. And if I admire your work, there's no reason I should hoard it just to myself. I feel like having a platform, I should be able to share what I favor with the rest of the world, and you are one of those creatives that I definitely favor your work. You've been producing wonderful work for a couple of years, and I know a bit of your story, so I'm like, Jael, don't spill the beans now before the beans cook, so I just want to get into it and start this discussion, start this conversation. I really want you to tell me a little bit about, this is a question I like to ask, and sometimes people don't remember themselves as a child, which I find very strange, but I do. I remember who I was as early as 3. Yes, I still remember what I was doing at 3, and I was just having a conversation like a few minutes ago, letting someone know that I store a lot of useless information in that brain of mine, and knowing what I did at 3 was one of them. And I like to ask my guests to take me back to your earliest memory, but specifically probably when you were 6.
Ooh.
Do you remember yourself at 6?
At 6, I can't say for sure that I remember myself at that particular age. But one of my earliest memories, I can't say I wasn't that aged, I wasn't that old. But I do remember, running around the gardens with my little sister. I believe that might have been when she first walked. She was chasing a friend of ours and I around gardens. That's the first time she walked. So I have a few memories like that from back then. But to specify to the age of 6, I don't think I can do that.
So tell me who what were you like as a child? Who were you like? What kind of child were you? If your parents
Well,
had to say,
if you had to ask my folks, yeah, if you had to ask my folks, my mother,
mm,
one word comes to mind: habitat, for sure. I was that little boy. I guess maybe stereotypical little boy, always running. You have boys, so
yeah.
stop running, don't run there, da 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 da. So I was that kind of child, very active, always running, very curious. Everybody was my friend as a child. And when I mean everybody, I mean from the vagrant on the side of the street to anybody else I meet.
Wow.
That was the type of child I was. Yes.
Where did you
Very
grow up
active.
as a child?
We
What
grew up
community?
various places actually. So I often say that when we left the Princess Margaret Hospital at the time, we went to our home then was on Cork Street. And if you remember Dr. Ricketts' office on Cork
Yes.
Street,
It's
right,
still there.
correct.
Well,
So,
yeah.
so that building is where we lived for a time.
Really?
Yeah, that's where we lived for a time. But not too long after that, we lived up in Eggleston, and so we have a whole um, family, if you want to call it
Geographic
that.
change.
Yeah, in Eggleston. We also not too long after that we lived in Madrill, and we lived at Wall House. We lived several places in our formative years,
You're
which
moving
was
around.
very interesting. Yeah, which was very interesting. It was a good experience because you get to, besides just seeing different places and living in different places, you get to meet different types of people. So after Madrill, there was Wallhouse. After Wallhouse was Shawford. After Shawford was Goodwill. And so throughout that time, well, I was able to build different groups of friends. And for the most part, we would converge at school. I went to SMP, that was my primary school, and then grammar school. And so it was interesting to have these different groups, these different pockets of friends from different places, different walks of life, different interests, and so on. So that was the type of childhood we had in terms of where we lived.
You say we like you have a twin.
Yeah, not a twin, but a sister, and she's just a couple years after me. And so it really was just the two. It was the two of us, growing up together in a sense. Because, and as you would imagine, because we moved relatively often, that meant that the two of us were close, for that reason in
You were
particular.
each other's best friends.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, right? And that's not to say that we couldn't be, or we wouldn't, but to say best friend, I mean, I don't want to tell lies to your platform, right? But she is definitely one of my favorite people, and it's wonderful how we've been able to keep our relationship over the years.
That's wonderful. That's really nice. You talk about your friends. What did you do with your friends at school? Like, what were some of the things that you did besides running all about the place and probably being Malakasi?
Yeah.
Um, what were some of the things that you did with your friends?
Well, early on, it was usually sports, between cricket and basketball. So cricket as a younger boy, basketball. By the time we
You
got
played
to,
cricket?
yeah, well, at school for sure, you play cricket in the streets. And back then, that's what we did, right? When you get home from school, that's one of the things you look forward to after you do your homework. If you do your homework, you would run up and on the street and play cricket until maybe somebody hit the ball into the bush and the ball is, it's too late to go looking for it, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So we did a lot of that for sure. By the time we got a little bit older, by the time we were maybe, let's say, high school or so on, it was more basketball with the friends. By that time, we were living in Goodwill, and so there's the Goodwill basketball court. I spent a lot of time there with my friends for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was basically it. There's a lot of sports at that point in time. As far as friends, besides sports, I think maybe one of the things we started doing was playing steel pan together. So at some point we started playing, the steel pan, the instrument, and that's another group of friends, musically inclined friends.
Okay.
So that was another thing that we got into in terms of friendships and what I did with them.
Wow. That's good. You're very tall, Yuri. Did you ever consider becoming a basketball player? Like,
Well, it's it's interesting that you would ask that. I honestly never considered it or never felt like it was some a path that I would go down. But
How
it's
how
funny.
tall are you for the people who don't know?
For people who don't know, I'm 6'6". For people who don't know, I'm 6'6". But the funny thing is because is I have uncles and my father as well played basketball nationally for several years, but it just
Mm.
wasn't a path that I personally took. However, it's a path that maybe I could have if I had that sort of inclination, maybe that sort of direction at the time. But it really wasn't something that I even considered for myself in any serious way. Although, I mean, looking back now, looking back at what some of the basketball players make and so on, you ask yourself a question. But at the time, no, it wasn't something in my radar.
Were you always creative, like as a child? Like, were you a creative child, or when
Well,
did that creativity kick in?
my creativity started with music. Like I mentioned Steel Pan a few minutes ago,
And yes,
right? But I vividly remember when I was about 10. So earlier on, you asked what I was doing at 6. I
you
couldn't
can
answer
remember
that,
10.
right? But for sure, I remember being 10 years old and having a certain interest in playing the keyboard. And I remember getting one as probably a Christmas present, one of those small little toy things. And that childish interest, it grew into more and more curiosity.
So you
And
can play the keyboard. You can play
I
the.
can, yes, I can, yeah. So eventually, after starting off that young, one of some of my best memories as a child playing music are with Miss Valina later. So that's where several people would have gone to play piano, to play recorder, flute, and so on. So I did the London exams, the Cambridge exam, I think it was called, for a few years as well. I also studied with Miss Lang Sorrento. So I did piano seriously for a few years. And in terms of creativity, like you asked, that's where it began, was music.
Mm.
Yeah,
That is really wonderful to hear. So you mentioned you went to grammar school. You studied at grammar school.
yeah.
Well, high school. Tell me a little bit about grammar school, Yuri.
Well, grammar school was, as I'm sure for most people, high school is the time when you make some of your deepest bonds, right? High school is where you kind of pick and choose where you want to go in life. You start to learn a little bit more about yourself. So grammar school was a good time for me. Some of the friends I have now are from those years back at grammar school, and my interest in terms of academics, my interest in business really developed while I was at grammar school. And I don't remember what age or what form I was in, but I do know at a certain point in grammar school, I kind of put it in my head that I wanted to work in a bank. For some reason, that was
Was it
one.
the look you wanted to have, like
Well,
is Jack?
I honestly don't remember what it was. It wasn't about the look. I don't think, because I wasn't really interested in those types of things at that time. Um, but I do know that was like a goal I made for myself, and it was at the forefront of my mind through at least third form, I believe, all the way to sixth form college and so on. So that is another aspect. If you want to ask about grammar school, that was one of the things for me for sure, was honing in on, in terms of academics, honing in on business as where I would focus my efforts.
What were your favorite subjects?
Well, I just mentioned business, but actually my favorite subject was history.
See, that's why
So,
I couldn't just assume it because you
yeah,
see
yeah.
business. I couldn't. Why history?
It was interesting to learn about what came before. Um, Although now at my age, it's you have a different perspective, so you can see maybe gaps in what we learned and what we didn't learn. But at the time, it was it was fascinating for me to be able to see where we came from, to see what happened before, Dominica looked like it does now, to learn
Mhm.
about the indigenous people, to learn about colonial times. One of the things I do wish though is that we learned more about the Negmao, for example. Because to my mind, those are our true heroes. But it was still interesting to learn about that period in time and to figure out why certain things are how they
Do you know what today is?
are. Yes, of course, of course.
Since you loved history so much, share with us a little bit about what today is. I put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, today is the 29th of May. And so
Mhm.
it's the anniversary of May 29, 1979. And just earlier, I was having that discussion with Lisa about just what I said in terms of what we are taught at school, maybe what we emphasize, and the big picture behind May 29, 1979 isn't something I remember learning about at school. So, in terms of one of the gaps, I think that is definitely one of them. But for anybody who doesn't know and who's looking right now, May 29, 1979 is when there was basically a riot in Roseau and there were at least 9 people injured and one person lost his life. And that eventually led to a change in government. Well, at first it led to a general strike, which we haven't had in Dominica in several years, and then a
Yes.
change in government. So it was a formative period. I mean, it's one date we're celebrating, yes, but it was a formative period.
Are we celebrating it or are we just remembering it?
Well, that's a good point, which is another discussion we had earlier. We just remembering it, and that's another very important point. I think we, like you and I, are speaking now, and so we remember it based on a little bit that we probably know. But I think not enough people know. Not enough people remember it. Not enough people um, are celebrating it as I think we probably should in terms of remembering the grit of these people back then, their determination to foster change and the outcome that came forth.
Do you think these kinds of people still exist today in our
Oh,
society?
sure, of course. We may not be as outspoken as they were, but we need to look at things in context, which is one of the important perspectives when you look at history. So the people who did what they did that day were not all brave soldiers. You know what I mean? They were regular people who got encouragement from their friends, from their family members. There were some people who were just frustrated. They were on their last straw. Some people and maybe some among them for sure, because there were people, as far as I remember reading about, there were people who were trying to rally certain efforts. But most people were just regular folks, just regular people who want to change. And I do think we have these type of people in society right now. Maybe what we need are different types of leaders to rally like they did back then, and to bring people together in a way that people can see more unity and more commonalities between each other as opposed to differences.
We could continue this conversation, but this is a Yuri conversation.
Yes,
We need to bring you back on to talk about history since you loved history so much, because
we can do
that's
that, yeah.
also
We can do
that was also my favorite subject. I want to big up Miss Chandler Hyacinth, who was the PS of education. She was my history teacher, and I absolutely loved her classes. So history was definitely one of my favorite subjects. But you mentioned, that you always wanted to work in the bank, and you decided to go into finance. Tell us a little bit about how did that happen? Did you attend university? How did you end up in the financial industry?
Well, like you just reminded me, yes, at some point in high school, I had that in my mind that I wanted to work in a bank. And so after sixth form college, at some point, they're asking you to write resumes, write your CV, send out letters and applications. So I did a ton of those, like most of us at the time would have done. And I got an interview with NBD at NBD, National Bank of Dominica.
You
And
manifest that, man.
was that?
You manifested that, man.
Well, I like to think so, right? I like to think so. It's one thing to manifest the the interview is another thing to get through the interview, right? So I was I was lucky enough to have gotten through that interview successfully, and
Wonderful.
and and that was the first my first full time job. And if I remember correctly, I might not even have been 18 at the time. I might have been 17 and some. And so it was a growing experience in several ways. Having a full time job at that age, but also being in a place of work full time because I had worked part time before that, outside of the financial industry. But being in what would have been at that time my dream job, it was it it was a very interesting experience. And at the time, I recall thinking that it's something working at the bank at the time is something I could do, for the next several years.
How long did you remain in that industry, and where did you like? What were some of the roles that you held, even within that specific
With
industry?
Yeah, well, I started off as a teller, like many people do, um, because you have to see how the bank functions at its most
Yes,
basic, right? And
yes.
so I did that for about a year, and I moved on to, I believe it was a data processing job, within the bank, which again was very interesting. I'm the kind of person who likes to learn, right? So wherever I'm at, I will be picking up new things and placing them together in my mind to figure, okay, well, this works with that and so on. So getting the experience to work behind the scenes, which is what that position was, allowed me to put one on one together in terms of some of what the bank did. So I believe I did that for about a year as well. And it was coming up on that year I started looking into to getting well, started looking into going to school. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, I had some friends who had started applying to universities, and I was probably one of the last in that group to 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 show that type of interest. I think a part of that is because I was so comfortable in that job, right?
Mm.
Um, but so I went ahead. I applied to a couple schools. One of them was MSU, Midwestern State University. I was successful, with the application, and I got through, and that's where I went, to study to study business administration with a concentration in finance. So I went there. I would have started in 2000 and let's see, it would have been 2005.
Mm. So you started university in 2005. Wonderful, wonderful. What was your time like at university? Because I know like a lot of folks leave to go to study. They leave Dominica to go to study, and they just say, "True pull, Dominica. We're not coming back." you know.
Yeah,
Um,
my time at university was good. I was never one of those though. As a matter of fact, maybe to a fault, I was one who I told myself as well as I told my friends, if we leave and never come back, who's going to develop them? That was one of the things I've said to several people.
it's
Um,
funny you say that. It's funny you
yeah.
say that because this is something that I've said too. But
Mhm.
lately I kind of change it around, and I say, because we've said it so much, like nobody pays attention to it, and they don't even see the bigger picture. And I now say, if you go and make another man's land great, and then he kicks
Mm.
you out, what will happen to you? Where will you go to?
Yeah, yeah,
you know
exactly.
And that is the conversation I say now. Like, you go
Yeah.
make another man's land great,
So
put you
so now
outside.
you're twisting it on them. I like that. I like that.
He put you
Yeah.
out. Where you gonna go? Right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you decided that you were not going to be one of these people.
Yeah. Yeah. I decided that. If we're being honest, if I'd gotten an offer from a company I was looking at after school to start working, or maybe if I'd gotten to certain colleges, right, to do a master's program after my first degree, maybe things would have been different. But it
Okay.
worked out in such a way that after my first degree, um, yeah, I came back home, and I was happy at the time to come back home, and I was lucky too. There's so much luck plays such a pivotal role, at different stages. And I say lucky because when I got back, although I wasn't able to get a job right away, and that's one of the things, one of the concerns, we have. You go to study, you come back, where you gonna work, right? I didn't get a job right away, but eventually, maybe within 6 or so months, I was able to get a job at NBD again. So I was able to continue my career in a sense, um, which opened up several doors for me, for one. And it was also interesting to see how things change or how they didn't change in the amount of time that I've been absent. So like I said, luck plays a significant role.
Wow. You did you go back as a teller, or you did different, or data
Yeah,
process?
I was in a different department at the time. I believe I was in the accounts department when I first got back, which made sense because I'd done finance at university, and from there I moved to the marketing department, which was an interesting move. But again, at times you have to pivot. So I believe what happened at the time was somebody was moving on essentially from the marketing
Mhm.
department, and there was a vacancy a vacancy at a level that was higher than mine. Um, and even though at the time I had no real interest in marketing, I knew that it's something that I could learn, something that I could get into. And I'm happy for that move because what I learned there has, I've used it throughout my life. So far, I've used it in my businesses, for example. So it's one of those things. Maybe at the time you say, should I do that? But in retrospect, you made the right decision.
Mm. Is that where you met your wife?
That is where I met my wife. Yes,
I'm just curious. I just like, hmm,
that is where I met my wife. Yeah,
hmm.
yeah.
And so, did you remain at National Bank, or did you ever leave before going
I
to creative space?
Yeah. Well, there was a point where I got what do you call it? I was restless. So like you said, yes, I did meet my wife there, and eventually I was able to move up to a higher position, which was good. It's a different department. It was in the risk department at that time. And at that point in finance, risk and the importance of risk was being taken a lot more seriously. And so it was interesting being at the forefront of what seemed to be new for banking. But even then, even though I was curious and interested, I was still I was still restless. I didn't know why, I didn't know how, I was just restless. I would find myself doing other things. I would find myself, um, for example, one of the things we are encouraged to do at a certain point while working at the bank is to further your education. So let's say you have a first degree. Have you considered, a master's? How will that help you advance? How will that help you be a better problem solver? And
Mhm.
I did take that route, but I found it difficult to focus on it.
Really?
I found it difficult, and like I said, business and so on. It had been on my mind since high school. I have the acumen for it, so that wasn't the issue. The issue was the interest. The issue was me being restless, and
Mm.
so I eventually left, and I eventually left National Bank, and that was it was easy for me after I'd made up my mind, if you know what I mean. But definitely it was it was difficult for the people around me, to understand and even to accept on a certain level. So after leaving NBD, I went to EH Child. That is actually a family company. It's my grandfather's company. And at the time, he was looking for some help. And since he was looking for some help, and I was looking for an out, it seemed like a good fit. And it was a good fit for a couple of years until I became more restless. You know, yeah. So I started looking around again. And
What,
so
what is your zodiac sign, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm a Libra.
Hmm.
Yeah. What does that mean though? Tell me, because I don't really follow them, but maybe you can let me know what that means.
I don't really do that publicly, Lena, to people.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe in private you'll tell me. Okay.
Maybe, maybe.
But yeah, so I mean, I was restless again. And I mean, at that point, I'm telling myself, okay, well, I need to figure it out. I need to figure out what it is I really want to do. What it is I'm avoiding doing. Um, so I eventually left EH Charles, and I landed back in corporate in a way because I ended up at Fast Cash for a couple of years.
Mhm.
That was a very good experience too. Like I said earlier, wherever I land, I always learn. Wherever I land, I'm an open book, so to speak, because I love dealing with people on that level, but I also love learning different things and absorbing whatever it is the environment has for me. So I was there for a couple of years, but I'll tell you what really, I don't use that phrase, but what kind of pushed me over the edge. I was at Fast Cash while I was at Fast Cash when Maria hit Dominica, right? And eventually, when we went back to work, if you want to call it that, there was there were a couple opportunities that knocked on my door that I was unable to take advantage of. Because by that time I'd already been taking pictures as a hobby. As a matter of fact, while I was at
Before you jump
yeah,
so far ahead, why did you start taking photo? Like somebody
yeah,
doesn't
and
just
that's
start
exactly
taking.
what I was just gonna tell you. So even while I was at NBD, one of my restless periods, if you want to call it that, was was working with small businesses. And actually one small business that I worked with, we needed pictures. We needed pictures to advertise on social media. And so it was around that time I first got a small little camera,
Mhm.
and I would use the camera to take pictures of the products, of the cakes and the cupcakes and so on. And and I would go home on the weekend and use the camera in the backyard. Maybe I would drive to Emerald Pool and take some pictures, take a few clips, videos. Not too long after that, I I decided, like I mentioned, that I played music, right?
Mhm.
So I still dabble at that time. And so around that time, I convinced myself that, you know what, if I get a better camera, maybe I can shoot a music video for some artists I'm working with. So I'm trying to think of what I can do with the camera. All that time, I still have a regular job, but that is where I would channel my creative energies to. And so, like I said, I had been doing photography on the side. Eventually, I got a real camera. I remember specifically asking, or I should say, I remember coming across the guys of 365 MMP,
Mhm.
um,
Like
and
and tried it.
liking and tried it, and liking what they were doing. And so when I convinced myself that I needed a real camera as opposed to the little thing I was playing with, I reached out to them, asked them, what camera brand do you use, so on, what do you shoot with, and I used the advice they gave me to inform my buying decision. And actually, I'm still shooting with that brand of camera to this day.
Wow.
But,
Wow. They were
but
like the first ones that really did it the way that is being done today.
it's been done right now, for sure. Because around that time, I think social media was just becoming itself, for lack of
Yeah.
a better way of putting it. And
It was
so,
still it was
although
still
there was,
media, not quite
yeah,
social.
yeah,
Yeah.
not exactly, not quite what it is now, but
Yeah.
definitely social media was finding its feet, right? And
Mhm.
they were doing beautiful work. And that's not to say that there weren't photographers or videographers before them, but they were doing work at a time where social media was a visual platform and they were in a visual field. And so
Yes.
you can
And I
call
think it
me
was also the digital aspect of it too.
right for sure.
So
Yeah,
it was more or less, they were doing social media, but they were also focusing on a lot on the digital,
digital.
like digital aspect. So not just social media, but doing events and doing, weddings and
There
doing,
you go.
and the photos are always so like, wow, you just wanted to
Wow.
have a photo 365.
Yeah. And so after having that conversation with them and after going in and getting the camera, Um, I never really took myself so seriously, as a matter of fact, but it was something that I enjoyed. So, like I said, on the weekends, one of my things would be to take a drive. And when I get to wherever I get to, if it's Jacko Falls, if it's Emerald Pool, wherever, I would practice. I would shoot. And so after a couple of years, I got better as far as I was concerned, and for sure, you're posting online, you're posting on social media, you're getting feedback from people. At that time, online forums and so on were a big thing, and so you're learning, and which is a big part of photography because people often ask, well, are you self-taught? And for the most part, that's how you start off, and you start off by just looking at other people's work. You might ask them a question, get feedback from them on your own work and so on. And that's what it was for the first couple of years. But it definitely started with a need in that business I told you about, needing to take pictures. And that's where it started for me. And I maintained that interest for years, regardless of whatever regular job I had. I maintained that interest. And so by the time I got to Fast Cash, like I mentioned before, that was the thing I would say that I was avoiding. So it was the thing that was pulling me, but I was trying to push it away. So when I was restless, that is what my interest was in. So if I'm restless at work, for example, I might be on a photography forum, scrolling, learning, reading, talking, and it's so important as a young person and even as an older person too, to make note of where you put your time, right? It's easy to just spend time doing random things, but it's important to know and take note of where you put your time to see where your interests lie, to see how you can develop those interests in a more meaningful way. And so by the time Hurricane Maria came around, like I said, I'd been doing photography on the side for a while. By that time, I'd even sold prints to some people, not many, but I knew it was something that I loved doing. And I got an opportunity. I believe it was Nikima. Yeah, I think it was Nikima Ray who said, "Hey Yuri, we're gonna have a documentary film crew to document the damage and the recovery efforts based on Hurricane Maria. Are you able to shadow the crew and take pictures because they want behind the scenes pictures and so on?" Now, at that time, that was a dream come true type of opportunity because you don't often, especially in Dominica, Dominica is very small. You don't often get that type of opportunity to work with an international crew. But as country manager of Fast Cash, still putting the pieces together after Maria, it was impossible for me to just leave my team and go off and do that. So I had to decline at the time. But that having to decline that opportunity never left me.
Oh wow.
It never left my mind. And it was maybe a couple months after that, I got another opportunity that I had to decline. And so and so I made up my mind that I would leave and try my hand at photography full time. And I did that at the end of 2018, I think it was 2017. So starting in 2018, um, I started with a fresh slate as a brand new entrepreneur, taking pictures,
Wow.
taking pictures from, yeah.
Do you remember the first photo you took that made you feel proud? Like, I might actually be good at this.
Mm. One of the places I will say there are several pictures that have done that for me. One of the pictures that did that for me is still one of my favorites to this day.
Mm.
Um, and that's after I've been taking pictures for several years, by the way. But it just meant to me, or it reminded me, I should say, that a lot of the type of photography I did, it's really about luck and chance in some ways, but also being patient. So there's a photograph I have of a sunrise over a mountain in Penrice. If you know where Penrice is, on the way to Delft. And I was heading to Pegwa Bay that morning, as a matter of fact, because I wanted to capture some pictures at the beach, sunrise pictures. But as I was driving through Penrice, I saw the sun doing some kind of thing over the mountain. It was a very overcast morning, and the sun, I would use the word, it was exploding over the mountain. And I stopped, I took a few pictures, I didn't like any of them, and I left. The next morning, I came back to that same spot earlier this time, and I kind of set up camp, and I was able to capture several pictures in that position, in that location. Luck comes into play because it just so happened that the sun came up in almost the same exact location. And for anybody who looks at this, the sun, moon, and so on, you'll know that the sun doesn't always come up, in the same place, or it doesn't always set in the same place.
I swear sometimes
In
the
some
speed is
consecutive.
different. Like I
Exactly.
swear, like sometimes it's going
Exactly.
faster. Like I literally sit there and look at it, and I'm like, oh my god, it's going
Mhm.
faster today. I'm like, oh, it's slower
Exactly.
today.
And that's why and that's why I call it luck in that sense, because um what if I had caught it at a different time of the year, right? Where the sun was just, making a turn, so to speak.
Mhm.
But I was able to get it in that same location, and I was also able to get the conditions of the previous day where it was very overcast over the mountain. And so by the time the sun rays hit the clouds, it really just exploded with orange and yellows and so on. And that was one of the photos I captured that really, really, I don't want to say I proved it to myself, but it's just one of my personal favorite pictures because of what it took to capture it, but also because of just the aesthetics, how it looks. You have the green because at that time of the year, the mountain was pure green, beautiful green, different shades. And just above the mountain, you have those orange colors with some of the gray of the clouds. So it's a pretty picture, in my opinion, but also the process to capture it. I always remember it. It's one of my favorite images.
Wow, that's beautiful. Your style obviously is so distinctly Caribbean. There's
Thank you.
lush, vibrant, alive. How do you develop your creative voice in your photography and even in your videography work?
That's a good question. Um, what I would say to that is practice. Practice meaning shoot as much as you can. That's what I've had to do because one thing you learn as a novice creative photographer, videographer, whatever, you don't really have a style at that point, right? Sometimes you don't even know what it is you want to shoot, what it is you like to shoot, and there's also the skill gap because if you're just starting, you also don't know how to shoot it, right? So there are different things you're trying to learn at the time, the technical aspects of it, of the craft, and also trying to develop your style as a creative. And for me, early on, I focused on nature photography and landscape photography because I was able to slow down and move much more slowly and develop that craft and develop different techniques and decide for myself what I like to see, what I don't like to see, and experiment. So as an example, there's a photographic technique that's called long exposure. That basically means you are like when you click on a camera, you hear the click, and that click is usually the sound of the shutter opening and closing. Right, the shutter is what basically captures the picture.
Mhm.
Long exposure simply means that the shutter opens for a much longer time than a typical picture. So when it's open for that long, different things can happen. So if you're focused on like the waves by the sea, by the beach, the resulting picture creates a more milky or more smooth look to the photograph. And early on, I learned that's something I love to see personally. It's interesting though because not everybody does, you know. So I've gotten feedback from people online, friends and so on, and they will say, "Boy, I think that water too smooth," you know. Personally, I love to see it, and so that is also an aspect of developing your creativity because the question is, are you going to allow feedback from that person or those people to determine what you like, what you don't like, and so that is always something that I've had to kind of maintain and kind of separate the feedback from what I personally love, what I personally would like to see more of. And so, like I said from the beginning, it's a lot about the practice because practice gives you that time to test different things and to make that decision for yourself rather than leaning on what somebody else might like based on their preferences.
Well, obviously, we know you love and you're good at capturing greenery and nature, you know.
Yeah.
But you've worked in both commercial and landscape photography. How do you approach these different genres?
Well, one of the things I learned early on when I took photography seriously, when I became an entrepreneur, I learned early on that, well, one, obviously, landscape photography isn't going to be all that I shoot, right? Because at that point, you have to pay the bills. And so you have to be a bit more, or maybe you can say a bit less picky with the types of jobs that you take on, at least when you're starting out. And so I also learned early on that in Dominica, because it's a relatively small market, you also need to provide videography as one of your services.
Hmm.
And so going into that with that knowledge, knowing that I need to branch out and knowing that I need to develop certain skills, I basically kept that mindset and and took on various jobs. I would approach two different scenes differently. For example, if I am on a landscape photography shoot, I typically have my own timing. I can get there as early as I need to. I'm probably not working with a model or anything. And so I can take my time. And maybe the only concern I really have is the weather in terms of what the sun or the clouds or the rain might be doing. When you're working commercially, though, especially if you're working with businesses, then you have a lot more moving parts. And so it's more about solving a problem for your client and not wasting their time. Time is money. And so by the time you hit the site or the set, wherever it is you're going to be working at, it's all about solving that issue for them in as quick and efficient a time as possible. So the mindset for the two can be very different, but you're hoping for the same outcome, an outcome where you're satisfied and whoever it is you're trying to deliver to, that they're satisfied.
Wow. We wanna take a short break. We wanna get water. We wanna wet our gorge a little bit. But when we come back, we're gonna learn about things like New York Times, like getting published in New York Times and big time magazines like Elle magazine. So we're gonna take a short break. You can grab some water. You on live can grab some water and come back. We're taking a short break. We gotta pay the bills because without the bills being paid, the internet will go off, right? So we're coming back right after this word from our most valuable sponsors. So stay tuned. We're coming back with more Yuri Jones. New York, we're talking New York Times. We're talking all these high set bougie stuff.
Around. Every now and then I get a little bit terrified, and then I see the look in your eyes.
Turn around, bite eyes. Every now and then I fall apart.
And I need you now tonight, and I need you more than ever. And if you only hold me tight, we'll be holding on forever. And we'll
I get up.
Boy, I hungry.
Wait, come see that. Take advantage of Perky's Pizza's college student discount. Spend $10 to $50 and get 10% off, or spend $51 and up for a 15% discount. Flash your ID and save big today.
We're back. We're getting back. We're getting ready to continue on with the show. We're here with Yuri Jones. And when we last dropped off, before we had to take a break to pay the bills, we're talking about big things. But before we talk about those big things, I want to talk a little bit about your coffee table book. What was the journey like putting that together? First of all, what is a coffee table book? Because some people might not know. And
Yeah.
what was the journey like putting that together?
Yeah. Well, a coffee table book is basically meant to be a book, but a piece of art, right? And so that's how I conceptualized it. That's how I thought about it. Again, I think I mentioned earlier on that I'm very business minded, and so even throughout that early period of my journey as a photographer, I was always trying to figure out, well, what can I do to make that time I'm investing in it make sense in terms of returns, right? And so in doing some research, I came across the concept of a photography book, a coffee table photography book. So basically, it's not a typical magazine that you might find on somebody's coffee table. It's supposed to be a piece of art, and so typically the cover is a hard cover. The type of paper the images are printed on is a heavy stock as well. Sometimes it's glossy, but it's really basically supposed to embody a piece of art. Instead of having it on your wall, you have it. You have several pictures in that book. And the journey to creating, well, to publishing my coffee table book, it was very interesting to say the least. So it's one thing to have an idea of putting out a book with pictures. It's another thing to decide what a book is going to look like. It's another thing to decide. Okay, well, um, it's gonna require X amount of money to put that book out. Now, I mentioned it's supposed to be like a piece of art, and art can be expensive, and it's supposed to be hardcover, and the paper's supposed to be thick stock, and all these things add to the bottom line. And after I made up my mind that I wanted to do it, and I shopped around for costings and quotes, I eventually settled on a company in the US, and they sent me their quote, and I was like, wow. And I tried to figure out, okay, well, what was the best way, to fund it? Would I take a loan? Maybe not yet. I eventually decided to use Kickstarter, which at the time was becoming very popular for those types of artistic ventures. And I was able to sign up with Kickstarter. I worked with a good partner of mine, Omar McIntyre, to do a video promoting that Kickstarter project. And I put it together and I put it out there. And I started sharing it on social media, sharing the links, asking people to support. Um, for people who are not familiar with Kickstarter, Kickstarter is a crowdfunding platform where creators decide that they will offer whatever their product is. In my case, it was a book. but you also have different tiers of support. And so maybe the first tier is just $10 to say, you know what, good luck, Yuri. And the next tier could be the actual cost of a book. The third tier would be 2 books and a couple of pictures, and you can structure it in whatever way you need. And so I did that, and it took several months actually to build up to that. Now obviously as a platform trying to make money, Kickstarter is not going to allow you to just have an open project for that long. So my
Mm.
first project on Kickstarter failed, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
Because I believe at the time the limit was 2 months. But that's the longest you could have an open project. And so the first project failed. But I didn't let that deter me. I decided to relaunch the project. I made a few tweaks, and I did it again. And close to the end of the timing, the time limit for that particular launch, I was met with, I would call them an angel right now. Basically, the company who eventually developed and built what was the Kempinski Resort, they reached out to me, and the gentleman I spoke with wanted to help bring that project to life. And
Wow.
so at the last minute, basically at the last minute, he was able to take me over that hump
Wow.
and close off that project successfully this time, so that I could get the funds to actually pay the foreign printers, get the books shipped here, pay customs and all that sort of thing. And so that journey, it probably took about a year from decision to publishing. And
Wow.
yeah, it was
Did you feel at any time during that period, did you ever feel discouraged, or
sure.
because I mean the first time you fail and
Right, right, right.
like and you say probably saying to yourself, boy, the economy so hard, Dominicans are gonna support this,
Yeah,
like photography, and probably you probably even got people saying, photography, you leave your big job working as country manager to go and take a picture. Like I mean, I even heard people say these things,
yeah, yeah.
like
I mean,
so
I've
I'm
I've
sure.
heard it all. Yeah, I've heard it all. At that point, yeah, I've heard it all, and as you might see, my head had right. So after the first unsuccessful launch, yes, there's a certain amount of discouragement you feel, but you still know to yourself that maybe it can work. I think that's one of the differences between an entrepreneur and a non-entrepreneur. There's a certain belief in whatever it is you're trying to put out there that everybody else might say, you know what, I don't think that's a good idea, but for you have a certain belief in yourself or in that project. And I think
Mm,
that's what I had that allowed me to just, keep pushing forward.
mm,
But also, encouragement from people helps, right? So in as much as I was not able to get the enough people to support me the first time around, that's not to say that there weren't people supporting, and so just knowing that there might have been 100 people or so that pledged to support the printing of that book, it 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 adds a lot to your encouragement, and it does a lot to dispel whatever discouraged feelings you might have. Because at some level, even though maybe not as much as you, at some level they believe in your project as well, and
mhm,
so you just have to push forward, and that's what I did. And it's the book came out. I was able to actually launch the book at the Yuri Open Center, just a couple weeks, I believe, before Hurricane Maria hit. Right. So I was glad to have gotten to that point. So we could have a little ceremony. We had people, we had wine and so on, and it was a nice experience. And considering the journey, it was a nice way to complete it. It was a nice way to bring everything together. And I'm happy to say that the books, even to this day, the books are still well liked by everybody who gets them. Um, um, As far as I've been told by some of my customers, the books are on shelves and coffee tables all over the world. They've given it as gifts to dignitaries, visiting officials, and so on.
Yeah, I think just
To
recently
family members.
somebody did that too. I remember somebody just recently gifted gifted your book to boy. I wish I could remember where I was. Somebody told me that they were gifting your book to I know exactly who it is. Shanita. She gifted your
Um,
book to someone.
right.
Some I think it was some president of some African country.
Right, right. And people like her, it's always good to have them in your corner too, because she's one, she loves the book, and every opportunity she has, she gives it to somebody.
Yeah.
And so again, when you have people like that in your corner, it's difficult to just give up, right? So in terms of discouragement, yeah, we all feel that, but I think it helps to have the right type of people, supporting you, giving you, words of encouragement. And you have to find it within yourself to push through and to remain motivated.
Mm. Let's talk about getting published.
Yeah.
Getting published in New York Times and El Harper Bazaars. Of course, that's a huge deal. Tell us
Yeah.
how these opportunities came about.
Well, it came about in my discussions with my contacts after these projects. I usually try to ask them, how you came across me. And maybe nowadays, most people, or I shouldn't say most, but a lot of people might come across your portfolio on Instagram, for example.
Mhm.
But a few years ago, and like both, at least New York Times was in 2018, and Elle magazine was in 2019, I believe, and both of them had come across my website. You know, and so for the technical minded people, when you have a website and you've been posting certain blogs and certain types of content to the website for a good period of time, which I had been doing, I was able to build up what is referred to as good SEO. And so when you Google certain things online, maybe certain sites, one of the top results would be a blog that I did that might show some of my work. And I think both the New York Times and the Els magazine, both people I spoke to from those organizations told me that's how they came across. They came across me. And obviously they'll do their research after that, they'll go to your socials and so on. um, but they were looking for, something about Dominica. They were looking for a photographer. So something as simple as Dominican photographer, nature. And because I've been posting for as long as I have, to my website and social media, my website came up, and it was for both projects. I was lucky, I should say, that the way they wanted to work allowed me to keep my regular job and get it done. Because as I mentioned, at the time with the fast cash, I had that opportunity that I had to pass upon. Um, but the New York Times piece in particular was supposed to be trying to tell a story about Dominica coming back, Dominica being resilient, and so it was a few months after Hurricane Maria. But I was able to work on that project on my own time, on the weekends after work, and and I was able to also develop a certain kind of network with my local contacts here. So, for example, one of the things they wanted to do with the New York Times was get some pictures of one of our premier hotels. And one of the first hotels that came to mind that was near enough was the Fortune Hotel. So it was good to be able to tap into people that I already knew and say, well, hey, I have this project, and they want this done. And it was nice to be accommodated very easily by people in your network. We also did some work down in Portsmouth for that same project. We did some work on the Waitikupuli National Trail. So we were just trying to tell us. I was just trying to tell a story about what Dominica went through, yes, but also where Dominica is going and how we are dealing with it. I remember one of the photos from that New York Times project. One of the photos they picked was a picture of the road to Scott said that was cracked, Well, it had collapsed actually. It wasn't just cracked. It's still that way. There's a little diversion right now.
Yes, yes, it
Um,
kind of went off. Yes.
right, exactly. So at that time, it was like I said, just a few months after Maria, and so it was definitely a scene to behold. So that's one of the pictures they used, and so that's just me giving an example of what they were trying to do. Also, if you remember back then, Scott said the village itself, obviously there's no seawall, and so a lot of the whatever structures were on the seaside were just completely devastated. So that's another photo that they picked. And so I did my best to tell the story that yes, this is what we look like now, but some of the pictures that I made sure to give them and that they did pick too was the fact that our nature, the lushness of our mountains was coming back. That's part of our resilience. So the different shades of green were starting to be very much more visible at that time. The Waitikubuli National Trail, it did suffer some damage, but the trail I went to, I don't remember the number, it was still intact. So I was able to show that to them because obviously from their point of view, it was for the tourism section. For their point of view, one of the things their viewers, their readers want to know is, well, Dominica is known for hiking. What do the hiking trails look like now? So I was able to use one of my photographs to show that, well, hey, yes, we got hit, but the hiking trails is still intact and, basically come on down, so to speak. Yeah. So it was an interesting experience. I mean, a photographer or videographer, that's what we look for, is that type of engagement from a well-known international brand or company. And it's definitely something that you hold close, to your heart. It's definitely something that you look out for more of, and that you put on your CV, as you go forward, so that people know, well, that's the type of experience you have as a creator, as a photographer, as a professional in the industry.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Obviously, your work has, we talk about where your work has been seen. You mentioned Kempinski, now Intercontinental Dominica, but your work is on display there. And obviously, that must be an amazing feeling.
Yes.
What do you hope that guests from establishments such as this can feel when they see your art? Like, what is the hope that what kind of emotions you want to evoke?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons I love landscape photography is because for me and you who have that typical Dominican experience, it's easy to take it for granted. It's
Mhm.
easy to go by the river, sit down in the river, enjoy ourselves, but not really marvel at the greenery we see around us. Visitors, on the other hand, many of them have never seen that before. And so, even when you're not out in nature, having the art on the walls at wherever they're staying, I like the fact that it gives them that sense of, well, this is where you're at. This is Dominica. This is what we need. We are the nature island. And so, and I've heard it from some guests. They love the fact, especially when it's a big print. I mean, in my opinion, the bigger the better in terms of prints, right? So especially when it's a big print, you can almost walk into it. And so having that artwork on the wall, it reminds them where they are. It reminds them of who we are as a country, the nature island. And I think it differentiates us because of how lush the country is. And so I'm proud to have my work up at, at the Intercontinental Resort. And as far as I know from the people I've spoken to there, and even the guests who I've spoken with, the artwork, it really does a lot to lift the experience. It does a lot to remind them why they chose to come to Dominica in the first place.
Wow. That's beautiful to know. The pandemic obviously hit creatives very hard. How did you adjust your work and mindset during this time? I mean, that was actually my first. That wasn't my first encounter, but that was my first encounter with your pieces,
Yeah,
so to speak. Because you'd shot me
yeah,
before the pandemic. Was it? Yeah, it was before. It was in 2019. You shot me, and but during the pandemic was the first time I came in contact with your work in terms of, I mean, I knew what you did, but when I say came in contact, touched it, felt it,
It's not
knew
right.
what it was, right? When you contacted me and you said, "Hey, Jael, I want you to do an unboxing, and you can pick whatever piece that you want," and I picked the freshwater lake, which I still have up to this day. It's still up on my wall. It has not left my wall. Still looks as beautiful as ever, like it was the very same day that I received it. Such a beautiful painting. I was actually on your site just now. I was while you're talking, I'm listening to you, and I'm like, I'm checking because you have such beautiful pieces
Thank you.
on your site. Like, I mean, they're and the fact that you're not just a photographer, you're or a videographer, you display your work in a way that it makes you're not I going to create an album and post all the picture kind of guy. It's you're gonna you're gonna get it in different forms and different shapes and different styles and different in the presentation, and even your website, like your logo is like bougie, and like it has that je ne sais quoi. You feel like, oh, you're on some fancy site when you
Right.
when
Okay.
you, when you land on
Well,
this site.
I'm glad you feel that way. Yeah.
I mean, it's the truth. I'm not trying to butter you up.
Mhm.
It is the
Yeah.
truth about it when you come. Like, I'm watching one of your paintings. Or I say your paintings, one of your pictures,
Yeah.
which is brushed ashore, which is a limited edition.
Right.
And oh my god, it is so beautiful. It's such a beautiful. I'm actually like, oh, like it takes your breath away.
And that's the point. The idea is, like you mentioned, I won't just put out, an entire album of all the pictures taken. One of the the things you learn with landscape photography, besides just the patience, is that most of the time you spend out in the field taking pictures and so on, you're gonna come back with nothing that you want to use. It takes a lot of going back to that same spot several times to get the conditions exactly as you need it. And so I put that same type of energy into the editing of my image, but also into the presentation of the images on my website, but also as a print that can go on your wall. Because if it's something I told myself long ago, when I started photography early on, I always felt that, especially for the type of photography I was most interested in, I always felt that just having it online was never enough, right? And so editing for print usually is a different type of editing. And so I tried to master that as much as I could because I need to be able to feel the print in my hand, because to me it's a different experience. Like I said just before, when it's when a large print is hanging up on a wall, you feel like you can walk into the scene, and that is what I want the viewer to feel like, as opposed to maybe just viewing a picture on your phone, and it might look nice, but it's just not the same experience. And so I have tried to put the same amount of energy in the different aspects of, the shooting, the editing, but also, yes, in the presenting of these images as prints, that can hang on your wall, or like we spoke about earlier, in a book that you can flip through and show your friends, your family, and so
Wow, wow. So we were talking about the pandemic before I got carried away by the fact that you when you shared that canvas with me of
on.
one of your pieces, and I had an opportunity to unbox it and so on. But obviously the pandemic really kind of like really shook some creators up. But you've still found a way to adjust your work. How did you adjust your work and even your mindset during that time?
Well, what I would say to that is thank God for good clients, right? Thank God for good relationships. So one of the things that kept me throughout the pandemic was the fact that I had a couple of regular clients who needed work. And while some of our movements were obviously curtailed, for example, we couldn't be, what was it, 6 feet, so we had to maintain that type of distance, we had to wear masks and so on. But I was still able to do some work on a regular basis. Now, for other jobs that might not have been so, I guess maybe not at a priority level, you find that businesses, maybe even some government agencies and so on, would push off those projects for later on. And so, like you said, there were a lot of creatives who hurt for that type of move because there was just not the same type of demand at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically took certain steps. For example, I have a good relationship with the aid bank. So I had to say, hey, this is the situation. How can, how can we work together to um to adjust what I'm expected to come up with. And that's just a real decision that you have to make as a business person,
Mm-hmm.
when you're adjusting your expectations. Um, and basically making those types of mindset shifts allowed me to focus on getting work done for the clients who were able to do work at the time. And although it wasn't as many as before, it was enough that I could stay afloat. It was enough that I could wait until um, the mandates were done, wait until, Dominica reopened completely, wait until, for example, tourism picked back up. And so I was just grateful to have one or two clients that needed regular work still, and I just focused on delivering for them.
Wonderful. I mean, that is amazing that you were able to continue to thrive, during such an amazingly difficult time. Uh, what would you say was probably the biggest lesson that you learned during lockdowns?
Wow. The biggest lesson I think is just a follow on for from what I just said is, nurture your relationships, right? Because what you find is, all there's some discretion businesses have as to what they will do now, what they will do tomorrow, or what they will do in 6 months. And you find that some businesses might opt for doing something now because they know it will benefit you. It benefits them as well, but because they know it benefits you, and maybe you need that paycheck, they can make an argument for your sake, that what, let's get it done now. Yuri has been good to us, and so that type of relationship set is what I think is my biggest lesson. And I think
Okay.
for most business people, it's easy to kind of get complacent at times. What I would say, it's easy to take for granted, existing relationships you have with customers. But in difficult times like during the pandemic, that's when that your relationship has been paying off, or that's when well, you know what, I was slacking off, which is why they decided to go with a different videographer, or which is why they decided to shut the campaign down 6 months early and that sort of thing. So really, my lesson throughout that time was, remember to nurture those clients and remember to treat them
Speaking of relationships, you
well.
recently celebrated your first anniversary.
Yes, I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
How,
Thank you.
how has your welcome? How has married life influenced your work or even your creative rhythm?
Well, that's a great question, Jill. I think it, how to put it, it allows you to have the understanding that no matter what, you have that person in your corner. Um, and that's not to say that that wasn't the case before, but obviously being married makes it more so, right? And depending on your situation you're in, because some people are married but living separately, but when you're living together, as far as creativity is concerned, it allows you to bounce ideas of that person in a more real way, right?
Mhm.
As they say, two heads are better than one. And so, as an extension of knowing that person is there for you in other ways, um, as far as creativity goes, you have a sounding board right there. You have, a critic right there. You have feedback right there. And so, in many ways, it allows you to get more done. In many ways, it allows you to maybe even be more diverse with your ideas, with your approaches, because obviously well, hopefully anyway, you trust that person, right? And
Yeah.
so if with with that type of feedback, maybe it it forces you to consider an approach that maybe you wouldn't have considered otherwise. And so it can definitely strengthen you as an artist, as a creative, and that's been my experience so far.
Wonderful. Good answer. Good good answer. This is we're getting to the end of the program, and
Yeah.
I want to encourage folks who would like to comment, who'd like to share words of encouragement, who'd like to ask any questions, to feel free, and they could do so at any time. Some people have chimed in earlier, so they came on earlier and had their 2 cents. Some people were having conversations with each other. Some people were tagging folks. So thank you to all those of you who are tagging and sharing the live. I truly appreciate that. But this is where we encourage you to come on in and share your thoughts, share your views, share opinions, share your questions, share your comments with us. I just have a few more questions for Yuri, and then we wrap up. So take your comments in just a little bit. How do you balance the pressure of being an entrepreneur as well as just life in general, like, because you left something that was very secure, at least in the minds of most people, right? So going back from where you started to where you are today, you walked away from almost what somebody might say is a security blanket, because entrepreneurship is very rough. Today you can make $1 million and tomorrow you can make $0. Right?
And after that, you can lose $1 million, right?
Boy, listen. So it's rough,
It's
right?
rough.
I've been an entrepreneur since 2012, and let me tell you, like, it's not, it has not been an easy road. But how do you balance the two? How are you able to balance, or how are you able to balance the pressure
Mhm.
of entrepreneurship versus just life? You know.
Yeah, that's another great question, Jael. For me, well, some might say I'm an overthinker. That's what some might say. But how I describe it is I like to be, about most things anyway, I like to be convinced before I do what I need to do. And by convinced, what I mean is I may not know 100%, but if I am 100% willing to go forward, then that means I've already thought about whatever pitfalls may come.
Mhm.
And so, as far as balancing the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, I knew fully well that there will be some months I'll be up and there'll be some months I'll be down.
Mhm.
In fact, I think one of the more difficult aspects of being an entrepreneur might not necessarily be handling it yourself, but it might be handling your close family members if you're married, and them being able to understand that, hey, this month was good, next month will be bad. I think that might be one of the more difficult scenarios. But for me, on a personal level, I knew walking into it that things will be up, things will be down. Um, what I try to do is put things in place, to handle the ups and the downs, and and that's basically it. But apart from the financial side, if you want to look at just life or work-life balance as they call it, I think you as an entrepreneur, it's easy to work, 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 work. It's easy to hustle. It's easy to always um, be looking for the next thing, right? And
Mhm.
there are times where you have to step back. There are times when you have to spend time with family. There are times when you need to check your health. There are times when you need to take a mental health day. You know, as an entrepreneur, it's easy to just keep going, 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 and sometimes you need to step back. And I try to, remind myself every so often that I need to do that. And I think I've been doing okay for now. And I'm hoping that other entrepreneurs can remind themselves as well, because it's easy to get caught up in looking for the next thing. It's easy to get caught up in busy work too, right? As an entrepreneur, because there's always something else. Maybe you can do your accounts. Maybe you want to
And you feel
schedule.
like taking on everything too.
Right, exactly. Because a lot of times, it might just be you, right? You might be a solopreneur, or maybe you have an assistant, but a lot of it is still on you. The marketing, it is the that, and sometimes you just have to step back. Sometimes you just have to leave it all. Like there's a thing, I'm sure we've seen online that if, God forbid, you passed away tomorrow morning, the world continues. And that's not to say that the world continues the same way, right? But bearing in mind that the world will continue, you need to put things in place so that you are not the one passing away tomorrow as much as you can, So you're the one that need to check your health today, right? You're the one that need to take a mental break today and these sorts of things. And so that you don't burn out, so that you don't neglect family and loved ones. And that's just what it is in terms of balance.
What's next for Mr. Jones? What's next? Any exciting projects on the horizon you want to tease us with tonight, or you probably just want to send us on your website?
Well,
What's next for you?
actually, I'm going to launch a semi-new project this coming weekend. Actually, tomorrow I'm launching it. So it's a project I've been working on.
Coincidinky do.
Was that?
Coincidinky do.
Coincidinky do, right? Yeah. I've been working on it for a couple of years now, and it's a limited edition print project. And
Is it the one that I saw? The one?
Well, that is one of them, but I think we spoke about it. Well, we did speak about it a while back, a few months ago.
Because
right?
I was looking for it
before this. Yes, exactly.
I was looking for it. I was like, how come he hasn't launched it? I've gone on your site a few times.
Right.
And
So
I was wondering how comes.
Yeah, so that I'm launching that tomorrow. And basically it's a project that I'm hoping will resonate with people who look for
We're not saying much. We're just telling them to go check it out, right?
Go check it out. But if you're looking for a Father's Day gift, that might be something that you're looking for. And so I'll be launching it on my social media tomorrow. So I would encourage your followers, your audience, to check out my social media pages.
Tell them what it is.
Facebook and Instagram. So you can find me on Facebook, Yuri A. Jones Fine Art. And it'll be the same thing on Instagram. Yuri A. Jones Fine, Fine Art, A-R-T. And tomorrow I should be launching that project. And I'm hoping it resonates with people as a Father's Day gift, but also as a gift in general. And that's my next project coming up.
Yeah, I've seen the project, and guys, it looks really good, and I think you guys would love it. So if you don't follow him yet, you should go follow him so you can get to see it too, and probably even get a couple pieces for your dad or probably for yourself, because for yourself. I want to go to the comment section. So some folks have been commenting. I just want to bring up some of the comments. So Ian Doctor, which I think is not actually Ian Doctor, but we'll leave that for the day. Yuri, you're being polite, not gaps. They lied to us. I think we're referring to history when we're talking about the history that was taught. Amanda Scotland says, it was great working with you, very positive and hardworking with a great work ethic. That is your former colleague at NBD.
Correct.
Chris Hilton says, Yuri's amazing. Just saying, big ups from Crystal Hilton. Continue doing great. So that's another comment here coming in. Kishma D saying, big up Jam Band. Very proud of you. Sending you some love. Lisa, your significant other commented. She says, pay attention to what excites you. Well, clearly, Lisa, he's been paying attention. 1 year later. 1 year. That's not what she meant then, but I just thought I would, pun intended. Tara said, it was good to hear your story from the beginning to now. Yuri, also Ron says, my great buddy, bro, Jones. So people are bigging you up there. What advice would you give someone who's stuck between a safe job and a creative dream?
Wow. I would say right off the bat, I would say go for it, right? I would say go for it. However, there's a caveat to that. I think you need to go for it, yes, but you also need to prepare for whatever that's going to look like. That usually means doing quite a bit of research into whatever it is you want to get into. That also usually means maybe taking a baby step into it before you go full time. Um, I think whoever is having that type of itch, they need to scratch it fully. But I would also say, be smart about it. And for example, I mean, we all have different life situations. We all have different monthly situations in terms of what our bills look like, you know.
Mhm.
And so while it it can seem like there's nothing else I want to do except, for example, take pictures. Are you going to be able to pay those bills? If you doubt that you can, then maybe you need to, for example, save a little extra for the next 6 months to give yourself a cushion. So that's what I mean by prepare, research, and so on. So it's not a matter of shedding your dream completely. It's more a matter of making a step in a smart way. And but definitely, I think if you're stuck, if you really do have that itch, if like me, you were restless in what is considered a very good job, then you definitely need to consider seriously scratching the itch and making a step, but be smart about it. And one additional thing I would say is have that conversation with your close people. If you're married, if you have a girlfriend, if you have close family, because in my experience, they might be the ones taking that decision even harder than you. Because people have.
Or just helping you with the process.
Yeah, well, that too, because it's essentially you want that. You want them to help you along. You want them to support you. You want them to be in your corner. But if they're stuck with a certain amount of shock, if they're stuck with doubt, for example, that might hinder you in ways that you probably cannot even fathom. So I
Mhm.
think it's important to have that type of discussion with your close people, as much as you would have had that discussion with yourself. Because we talk to ourselves, we rationalize with this, with that, but
Mhm.
it's important to bring them into the know. Not necessarily get their buy-in per se, right? I mean, that decision is yours, but to bring them in and to let them know, well, hey, this is the decision I'm going to make, and so you can have support from them as opposed to trepidation and fear and concern that might hinder your progress.
Yuri, it has been a pleasure having you on here this evening. It was
It's my
good.
pleasure. Jael. My pleasure.
It's been good getting to know you a bit better. I want to give you an opportunity if you want to shout out anybody, you want to say any special highs, you want to send any love, hugs, kisses, smoke signals. I want to give you an opportunity to do so. Now, so I open up the floor to you,
Thank
so
you.
you can have the final say.
Thank you. Well, I definitely want to shout out my wife, my partner in crime. But I also want to mention, and I probably should have before, parents and that type of support structure, they can play a big role in what your decision looks like. So I want to big up my parents for their continued support, from my crazy decision back then to what it is now. And I also want to shout out to my friends. I had several friends along the way who inspired me, I would say, not necessarily specifically in photography, but even in just their own prowess as business people, business owners, entrepreneurs, people willing to take risks. So I want to shout out people like, he's passed now, but Elias was a great friend to me. Shout out Tridell, somebody who's not afraid to take a risk. I also want to shout out people like Urania for Busy Bubble, who stepped out doing her business, years ago. She's one of my good friends. And and finally, I want to shout out the people in the comments, the people who've reached out so far during this live, and tell them thank you for their support, in whatever way.
Yes. Thank you very much for joining us here, Yuri, to share your story. It was wonderful getting to know you a little bit more in depth,
Thank you.
about
It was
your
my pleasure,
story.
Jay.
And I wish you all the best. We're looking forward to the photos that are going to be launching tomorrow, the pieces that are
Tomorrow.
going to be launching tomorrow. So make sure you follow Yuri A. Jones Fine Art on all social media platforms, wherever you can find him. Just look for him wherever you are, and go and take advantage of whatever offer he has. He sometimes has little freebies where I give you a little 15% off, a little this and a little that. I know, I just go on the site and he probably doesn't know it's me that does buy things because I go on all kind of aliases. But
Really?
sometimes we do what we have to do when we have to do. I have a few names, they didn't tell I'm just joking. But sometimes I send people there, to purchase things
I
and stuff.
appreciate it. Yeah, your
But I
support is
love
great. I
your
appreciate it.
site, and I enjoy the work that you do, and I want to wish you and yours all the best.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Jael.
you
Same to
only
you.
says Michael, so I have to say one yours, right? Have a good night.
All right, thanks. Same to you.
Bye bye, guys. That was it. Yuri Jones. Go check out his stuff launching tomorrow for Father's Day, just in time for Father's Day. Giving you a few options. I got an opportunity to see the pieces. They're beautiful. All right, they're freaking beautiful. All right. So make sure you follow him wherever he's at on social media. We can't tell you where they are. So you're just gonna have to go follow him and get to know what they are for yourself. All right. It was a pleasure having you guys join me here for another night. This is my last show in May. That is it. Well, this is my last show like this. You never know. I can pop up at any time. Want to encourage you to follow, especially on YouTube, because I'm gonna be popping up. I'm gonna be popping up. It might just be tomorrow. The only way you're gonna know is if you follow, right? So make sure you follow me at Jael Joseph on YouTube, Jael Joseph on all other social media platforms. And thank you very much for your support. Thank you to my sponsors who've been sponsoring the show. The month of June is our final month for our season, for the season. So we wrap up this season at the end of June. So we have our health series that's going to be coming out. We're going to have a few other shows throughout the month of June, but it will be the end of our season. And when our season ends, who knows what's going to happen next, right? So stay tuned, guys. Thank you very much for all of the love, the support that you continue to show. I want to wish you guys a pleasant evening, a safe end of May, because May is done. May 29th, tomorrow is the 30th, Saturday is the 31st, May feeling back, right? Thank you very much to all of your support, and I will see you guys on another live show like this in June. June has come too soon. The year is done. 6 months into the year. It's also the start of the hurricane season. I want to encourage you guys to start making preparations because the hurricane season is upon us. If you live in the Caribbean, especially if you live in Dominica, start making your preparations. All right. Until next time, I want to say big up to Samaj, my producer, who definitely holds down the fort and is able to continue to help me put these wonderful shows together, both in front and behind the scenes. All right, guys. Thank you, and I will see you guys soon. Have a good night. Bye bye.